Imagine dedicating 4 years of your life to building the digital nervous system for a $1 billion logistics empire, only to be fired by a smug executive who says you lack strategic vision. They thought I was just a replaceable code monkey. They had no idea I legally owned the core technology keeping their entire company from collapsing. If you enjoy a bitter ending for incompetent management, sit down. Let me teach you about real strategy. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Boss Revenge Stories. I want to start by sincerely thanking all of you for your incredible support, but unfortunately, YouTube has completely demonetized our channel, leaving us with absolutely no budget to continue operations here. Because of this, we will be forced to stop uploading new videos on this platform in the near future, and will be shifting our operations over to Patreon. If you enjoy today's story, please consider supporting us by joining our Patreon community. There, you can listen to exclusive, true stories that are even better, significantly longer, and feature incredibly detailed situations that we simply cannot make public on YouTube, all brought to life by multiple emotional voice actors. You can easily join by scanning the QR code currently on your screen, or by clicking the Patreon link down in the video description or the pinned comment. Now, let us dive right into today's story, where you will meet a brilliant systems architect named Paisley Hernandez. Austin, Texas. The afternoon sun was glaring off the pristine, floor-to-ceiling glass walls of Garrison Vance's brand-new corner office at OmniVantage Logistics. Garrison was our newly appointed Vice President of Operations. He was the kind of guy who wore $3,000 custom-tailored suits, flaunted a glowing Master of Business Administration degree from a university that prioritized networking over actual education, but still needed the IT help desk to explain how to connect his ultra-thin laptop to the conference room monitor. He had been at the company for exactly 3 weeks, and he already walked around the open-plan floor as if he had personally laid every single brick of the building. I was called into his office right after the morning stand-up meeting. I walked into the acoustic fishbowl, and Garrison gestured vaguely for me to sit down across from his massive, unnecessarily polished mahogany desk. He steepled his fingers together, leaning back in his expensive ergonomic chair, projecting the exact authoritative body language you would find on page 42 of a bargain bin corporate management textbook. "Paisley," he began, using a tone of voice that dripped with practiced condescension, "I want to talk to you about the future of OmniVantage. We are entering a phase of exponential hypergrowth, and to achieve our macro-level objectives in this fiscal year, we need to drastically synergize our cross-functional teams." I just stared at him. He was tossing around hollow corporate buzzwords like confetti, praising our new so-called innovative vision, yet I knew for an absolute fact that the man did not even know how to open a basic system log file. How was a master of talking for 10 straight minutes without actually saying a single thing of substance? "The truth is," he continued, finally dropping his manicured hands to the desk, "we need minds that are geared toward high-level strategic direction. We have outgrown the need for people who just tinker with the technical plumbing. We need architects of business, not just keyboard jockeys who get lost in the weeds of the code." I did not flinch. I let him keep talking, mentally translating his garbage jargon into reality. He wanted to replace me with someone who made pretty charts. "Therefore, we are restructuring the entire technology division," Garrison said, pushing a remarkably thin manila folder across the pristine surface of his desk. "Your position as systems architect is being eliminated, effective immediately. We are bringing in a top-tier external consultancy group to modernize our backend and align it with our new dynamic framework." I was talking about a group of overpriced consultants who probably charged $500 an hour just to ask me how my own system worked so they could put it on a presentation slide. "Inside this folder is your severance agreement," Garrison stated, tapping the paper with his index finger. "It is a standard 2 weeks of pay. In exchange, over the next 14 days, you will hand over full administrative access of the Aegis dispatch matrix to the new consulting team. You will train them, give them the master keys, and ensure a seamless, frictionless transition." The Aegis dispatch matrix, the absolute beating heart of OmniVantage Logistics. It was the system that routed tens of thousands of urgent medical supply deliveries across the country every single day, and he was casually handing it over to a group of clueless strategy creators. Garrison leaned forward, clearly expecting me to break down. He was waiting for the tears, the desperate pleas to save my job, or maybe an angry, unprofessional outburst that he could use to justify having security forcefully escort me out of the building. He thrived on that toxic power dynamic. Instead, I maintained a completely blank expression. My face was an absolute fortress. I did not shed a single tear. I did not utter a single word of protest or anger. My silence hung in the room, thick and heavy, until Garrison shifted uncomfortably in his fancy chair. His smug, arrogant smile faltered for just a fraction of a second, because I gave him absolutely nothing. His massive ego forced him to mistake my stone-cold composure for the quiet resignation of total defeat. I calmly reached out and picked up the thin folder. I flipped it open, glancing at the paltry severance numbers and the incredibly restrictive, overly broad non-disclosure agreement stapled to the back. "I will need my lawyer to review this before I sign anything," I said. My voice was perfectly level, devoid of any tremble, sadness, or hesitation. Garrison frowned, clearly annoyed that I was not following his script. "It is standard corporate boilerplate. Paisley. Refusing to sign it right now will only delay the processing of your final paycheck. My lawyer will review it," I repeated calmly, standing up from the chair. I did not wait for his permission to leave. I turned around and walked straight out of the glass office. I headed to my desk, picked up my personal mechanical keyboard, my noise-canceling headphones, and a small potted succulent. That was all I really needed. As I walked out of the front sliding doors of the Austin headquarters, stepping out into the blazing Texas heat, I allowed a small, mysterious smile to finally touch my lips. 4 years ago, OmniVantage Logistics was not a billion-dollar empire with pristine glass offices. It was a financially struggling startup operating out of a dilapidated, uninsulated aluminum warehouse on the industrial outskirts of town. During the summer, the temperature inside that building regularly hit 104 degrees. We did not have ergonomic chairs or mahogany desks. We had folding tables, extension cords duct taped to the concrete floor, and a desperate dream of revolutionizing the medical supply chain. I practically lived in that sweltering warehouse. I survived on cheap instant coffee, vending machine snacks, and the pure adrenaline of solving complex logical puzzles. While the original founders were out begging venture capitalists for seed money, I was hunched over my monitor, single-handedly writing the code that would eventually make them rich. I built the proprietary geospatial routing algorithm completely from scratch. It was a beautiful piece of digital architecture. It did not just draw lines on a map. It calculated real-time traffic patterns, weather anomalies, vehicle weight distribution, and urgent medical priority codes to optimize millions of critical deliveries. We are talking about routing emergency blood supplies, transplant organs, and life-saving pharmaceuticals across the entire country with zero margin for error. My code was the only reason the company survived its first winter. But there was a major problem. The founders were practically broke. When it came time to formalize my position, they could not afford to pay me a competitive market salary. They offered me a handful of worthless stock options and promised that we would all be rich one day. Furthermore, they were terrified of the legal liabilities associated with medical transport. If my algorithm made a mistake and a critical shipment was delayed, they did not want the legal blowback destroying their fragile personal finances. I saw an opportunity, and I took it. I told them I did not want their empty promises of future wealth, and I certainly did not want to take on their corporate liability. Instead, I proposed a different structure. I formed my own independent limited liability company, officially registered as Hernandez Nexus Solutions. I told the founders that my company would sign a direct business-to-business contract with OmniVantage. They were so desperate and so relieved to offload the legal risk that they signed the paperwork without paying a real lawyer to review the fine print. That original contract contained a very specific, ironclad, life-or-death clause that I drafted myself. It stated unequivocally that the core routing algorithm and all its underlying intellectual property belonged entirely and permanently to Hernandez Nexus Solutions. OmniVantage Logistics did not own the technology. They were merely granted a license to use it. The cost of that corporate lease? Exactly $1 per year. However, that incredibly generous rate came with one massive, non-negotiable condition cleverly buried in Section 4, Paragraph B. The lease of the software license was strictly contingent upon my active, full-time employment at OmniVantage Logistics. If my employment was terminated for any reason, by either party, the commercial license would immediately expire, and all rights to use the routing algorithm would instantly revert back to my private company. Over the next 4 years, the startup exploded in growth. The original founders cashed out, selling the company to a massive private equity firm. The warehouse was abandoned for corporate high-rises. We went through 6 different rounds of management restructuring. The original paperwork, including my bizarre $1 business-to-business contract, was digitized, shoved into a forgotten legacy server, and completely ignored. The new waves of executives, the shiny suits like Garrison Vance, never bothered to read the foundational documents. They were completely obsessed with looking at quarterly revenue charts, profit margins, and overhead reduction strategies. They simply assumed that because they bought the company, they owned everything inside it. They never realized that the most valuable asset they had was entirely leased. Knowing that the corporate culture was shifting toward ruthless corporate greed, I took steps to protect my digital property. I did not just rely on a piece of paper hidden in a legal department folder. I hard-coded my insurance policy directly into the Aegis dispatch matrix. I designed and deployed a hidden application programming interface, a silent authentication gateway buried deep within the core architecture of the system. Every single time the routing algorithm initiated a calculation, it sent a tiny encrypted ping to this hidden gateway to verify the software license, and I linked that verification process directly to the company Active Directory and the Human Resources Payroll database. It functioned like a digital heartbeat. As long as the Human Resources system showed that Paisley Hernandez was an active employee receiving a paycheck, the gateway silently validated the license, and the trucks kept rolling. It was elegant, invisible, and completely legal based on the contract they had signed. I had effectively built an invisible empire, holding the keys to the kingdom while letting management pretend they were sitting on the throne. They fired me for not understanding business strategy, totally unaware that my employment status was the only thing standing between their billion-dollar valuation and absolute operational collapse. Over the next 14 days, I played the role of the exceptionally compliant, recently laid-off corporate drone to absolute perfection. Garrison had brought in his elite squad of external consultants, a team of young men who looked like they had just walked out of a luxury catalog photo shoot. They charged the company an exorbitant fee, probably somewhere around $800 an hour per person, just to sit in our conference rooms and drink artisanal sparkling water. I was tasked with handing over the keys to the kingdom, and I did exactly that. With a warm, helpful smile glued to my face, I spent hours walking them through the user interface, the front-end dashboards, and the colorful data visualization modules. I showed them how to generate the pretty quarterly reports that Garrison loved so much. They furiously typed notes on their expensive tablets, nodding along as if they were absorbing the profound secrets of the universe. But these guys were incredibly arrogant and fundamentally lazy. They were strictly surface-level thinkers, because they assumed I was just a low-level technician. They never bothered to ask me about the deep architectural infrastructure. They were so captivated by the shiny buttons on the dashboard that they never once asked to look at the actual engine running under the hood. Not a single one of them requested an audit of the application programming interface structures. Not a single one of them traced the authentication pathways. They just wanted the administrative passwords, so they could check the box and tell Garrison the transition was complete. Naturally, I answered every single question they asked me with complete honesty. I just never volunteered the information they were too incompetent to ask for. The silent verification gateway remained my little secret. While the consultants were busy congratulating themselves on a seamless transition, I was executing a meticulous, entirely legal digital heist. I was not stealing anything. I was simply gathering the armor I would need for the inevitable legal war. During my final days, while pretending to organize my digital workspace, I quietly downloaded copies of every single system log from the past 48 months. I exported the entire version control history, pulling time-stamped cryptographic proofs of every line of code I had ever committed to the repository under the name of my private company. More importantly, I dug deep into the company archives and retrieved the original, unedited email chains between myself and the founding members from 4 years ago. I secured digital copies of the original business-to-business contract, highlighting the explicit $1 a year licensing terms and the termination clause. I backed all of this up to 3 separate, encrypted external drives. If Garrison or his highly paid corporate lawyers ever tried to claim that I had stolen company property, I had an impenetrable fortress of documentary evidence proving that the property had always belonged to me. The most critical part of my plan, however, was the mechanism of the separation itself. If a fired tech worker goes into a server and maliciously deletes critical files, or writes a script to crash the servers on their way out, that is considered a federal crime. That is corporate sabotage, and you can absolutely go to prison for it. I was much smarter than that. I did not write a destructive virus. I did not install a malicious backdoor. I simply relied on the pure, elegant logic of contract law translated into code. I configured the system so that precisely at 12 o'clock midnight on the final Friday of my employment, the internal human resources directory would officially update my status to terminated. At that exact second, the hidden gateway would check for my active employee credential, find it missing, and recognize that the commercial license had legally expired. But instead of causing the entire logistics network to violently crash and burn, which would trigger immediate critical emergency alarms, I programmed a graceful degradation. When the license expired, the geospatial algorithm was instructed to simply revoke its proprietary logic and return to a pure, empty default state. The servers would stay online. The user interface would remain perfectly active. The databases would not corrupt, but the actual map, the intelligent geographical brain that calculated routes, distances, and variables, would instantly wipe itself clean of all customized intelligence. It was the digital equivalent of repossessing the engine of a car but leaving the radio playing. Technically, the software was functioning exactly as it was legally permitted to function without a valid commercial license. It just became incredibly, spectacularly useless. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon on my last day, I handed my plastic security badge to the human resources representative. I shook hands with the lead consultant, wishing him the absolute best of luck with the new strategic direction. I walked out of the glass building, drove straight to the airport, and boarded a direct flight to Cabo San Lucas. I settled into my spacious first-class seat, ordered a double tequila margarita with salt on the rim, and powered my smartphone completely off. I had a beautiful beachfront resort waiting for me, and I was going to enjoy a peaceful, undisturbed weekend while Garrison Vance blindly steered his billion-dollar logistics empire straight off a digital cliff. Exactly at 12 o'clock midnight, Central Standard Time, my employee status officially changed from active to terminated in the OmniVantage Human Resources database. A fraction of a second later, the Aegis dispatch matrix sent its routine, automated pulse to the hidden application programming interface gateway. The ping returned negative. The lease had officially expired. Just as I had designed it, the servers did not crash. No emergency alarms blared in the network operations center. Instead, the proprietary geospatial logic simply packed its bags and vacated the premises. The system reverted to a completely blank slate, cleanly stripping away 4 years of intelligent routing data, real-time traffic algorithms, weather predictive models, and complex logistical pathways. It defaulted to absolute zero. But logistics software cannot operate without a final destination, lacking any specific, intelligent coordinates for the tens of thousands of active shipments currently in transit. The system fell back on the most basic mathematical default possible. It took the geographical boundary of the contiguous United States, calculated the exact dead center, and blindly assigned that single coordinate to every single active manifest in the database. Fast forward to 6 o'clock the next morning, across the entire country, tens of thousands of long-haul truck drivers, local delivery couriers, and automated drone dispatch systems powered on their navigation terminals. They connected to the cloud to download their daily routing instructions, every single one of them, from Seattle to Miami, from Boston to San Diego, received the exact same delivery destination. It was a completely random, privately owned cornfield in Lebanon, Kansas, widely known as the exact geographic center of the United States. The customer support switchboard at the Austin headquarters did not just ring, it practically exploded into a symphony of pure panic. It was absolute, unadulterated chaos. By 7:30 in the morning, independent drivers were threatening to go on a wildcat strike. They were screaming at dispatchers because their navigation systems were telling them to drive 2,000 miles in the wrong direction to deliver a crate of bandages, a pallet of heart monitors, or a shipment of sterile syringes to a literal cornstalk in the middle of nowhere. Some drivers, following automated protocols blindly, actually started driving toward Kansas, causing massive traffic anomalies on regional highways. But this was not just about confused truck drivers and a funny map error. We handled critical medical logistics. By 8 o'clock in the morning, major regional hospital administrators were calling in, threatening massive multi-million-dollar lawsuits. Shipments of emergency surgical equipment, temperature-sensitive pharmaceuticals, and critical blood plasma were sitting abandoned at random transit hubs, waiting for a valid routing code that no longer existed. The medical supply chain for dozens of major cities was paralyzed. Back in Austin, Garrison Vance was having a spectacular, career-ending meltdown. I can only imagine the sheer panic echoing inside that acoustic fishbowl of an office. His custom suit was probably soaked in nervous sweat. He dragged his expensive team of external consultants out of bed and ordered them to fix the glitch immediately. The consultants confidently cracked their knuckles, logged into the administrative dashboards, and tried to manually force a global routing override. But they did not understand the underlying architecture at all. They tried to use blunt force to inject unauthorized data tables directly into the core matrix to correct the maps. That reckless move triggered a secondary security protocol I had built years ago to prevent external hacking. The system instantly recognized their brute force attempt as a malicious injection attack. In a brilliant display of automated self-defense, the anti-fraud architecture immediately revoked all administrative privileges, aggressively locking down the internal databases completely. Garrison and his high-priced consultants were completely locked out of their own platform, reduced to staring at blinking red error messages, while the supply chain of a billion-dollar empire ground to a catastrophic halt. They could not even cancel the orders. They were trapped in a red-only nightmare. You cannot hide a logistical failure of that staggering magnitude for very long, especially not in the era of viral social media. Frustrated, angry truck drivers started posting screenshots of their bizarre Kansas routing instructions online. Within an hour, a prominent financial technology blogger picked up the story, wildly speculating that OmniVantage Logistics had suffered a massive ransomware attack, a hostile foreign hack, or a critical national security breach. Twitter went absolutely berserk. By 9 o'clock in the morning, exactly 30 minutes before the New York Stock Exchange even opened for the day, the pre-market trading numbers for OmniVantage were in a terrifying freefall. The stock price was nosediving, plummeting over 25% before a single official trade had even been executed. Institutional investors were panicking, dumping their shares as fast as they could hit the sell button, desperate to find a scapegoat to save his own neck. Garrison stormed down to the legal department. He demanded that they draft an immediate federal lawsuit against me for corporate sabotage, cyber terrorism, or whatever terrifying legal buzzword he could remember from his management seminars. A team of junior corporate lawyers frantically began digging through the digital archives, pulling my employment file, looking for the non-disclosure agreement I had refused to sign, and searching for any legal angle to throw me in a federal prison. Instead, buried deep in a legacy server folder from 4 years ago, they found it, the original, fully executed business-to-business contract between OmniVantage Logistics and Hernandez Nexus Solutions. They sat there in stunned, deafening silence as they read the highlighted clause explicitly stating that the core technology was leased for exactly $1 a year, and that the license instantly terminated the moment my employment ended. The general counsel stared at the screen, realizing with a cold, horrifying certainty that no crime had been committed. I had not hacked them. I had not sabotaged their servers. I had simply stopped letting them borrow my highly valuable intellectual property for free. The trap had sprung. It was perfectly legal, entirely valid, and absolutely irreversible. The gentle sound of warm waves crashing against the pristine sands of Cabo San Lucas was the perfect soundtrack to my morning. I was lounging under a large white cabana, the salty ocean breeze gently rustling my hair as I casually stirred a fresh mango margarita. I had kept my smartphone completely powered down for a full 24 hours, savoring the absolute tranquility of my newly found freedom and the knowledge that a digital bomb had detonated in Texas. But human curiosity is a powerful thing. Around 11 o'clock in the morning, I decided to turn the device back on. The moment the screen illuminated, the phone violently vibrated in my hand for 2 solid minutes. It was desperately trying to process an absolute avalanche of missed communications. I had 73 missed calls, over 100 frantic text messages, and a flooded email inbox. Almost all of them were from Garrison Vance. It was deeply satisfying to scroll through the chronological evolution of his mental breakdown. His communications painted a beautiful, tragic portrait of a narcissist losing complete control of his fabricated reality. His first email arrived precisely at 6:45 in the morning. The subject line was written in aggressive capital letters, demanding immediate action. Paisley, the system map is malfunctioning. The external consultants are locked out of the core database. Log in remotely this instant and resolve this catastrophic routing glitch. This is a direct managerial order. He was still blindly clinging to the pathetic illusion that he possessed some kind of authority over me. By 8:30 in this morning, the tone had shifted drastically from arrogant command to aggressive legal threats. Paisley, what you have done constitutes severe corporate sabotage. You are destroying a billion-dollar supply chain. Our legal department is currently drafting a massive federal injunction against you. If you do not restore full system functionality within the next 15 minutes, we will ensure you spend the next 20 years in a federal penitentiary. It was a hilarious, desperate bluff, considering I knew the legal department had absolutely no grounds to stand on. The final email, sent just minutes before I turned my phone on, was a masterpiece of pathetic desperation. The arrogant vice president of operations was now virtually on his knees. Paisley, please respond to me. The board of directors is absolutely furious. Our medical partners are threatening to cancel every single one of our contracts. I know we got off on the wrong foot yesterday, but I am begging you to show some professional team spirit. Let us put the past behind us and save this company together. I took another slow, refreshing sip of my icy margarita. I did not reply directly to Garrison. Instead, I composed a brand new email and carefully typed in the executive addresses of every single member of the OmniVantage board of directors, the chief executive officer, and the managing partners of the private equity firm that owned the company. I attached a high-resolution digital copy of the original limited liability company contract, using a simple digital marker tool. I highlighted the $1 annual lease agreement and the automatic termination clause in bright, glowing yellow. I kept the body of the email ruthlessly brief and painfully polite. To the esteemed members of the board, please refer to the attached foundational documentation regarding the legal expiration of your temporary software license. As my employment was terminated yesterday afternoon, your commercial access to the proprietary routing logic has naturally concluded. Have a wonderful weekend. I pressed send. I could vividly imagine the explosive, oxygen-leaving reaction in the executive boardroom back in Austin. The highest-ranking officials in the company were suddenly realizing that their grand billion-dollar logistics empire was built on a rented digital foundation, and the smug executive they had just hired to streamline operations had foolishly evicted the landlord. Less than 10 minutes later, My phone rang again. The caller identification displayed Garrison's name. I let it ring 5 times before I casually swiped the screen to answer. "Hello, Garrison?" I said, my voice as calm and cool as the ocean water. "Paisley," he gasped, his voice trembling with a chaotic mixture of raw panic and forced, nauseating charm. "Thank goodness you finally answered. Listen, there has clearly been a massive, incredibly unfortunate misunderstanding regarding your employment status and that old legacy contract. You are a highly valued systems architect. We deeply respect your incredible work. The board wants to make this right immediately. Name your price. Paisley. Just tell me what number you need to see on a check to turn the mapping system back on today." I was trying to flatter me, attempting to mask his utter humiliation behind the thin facade of a standard business negotiation. I was not going to let him off the hook that easily in a private, unrecorded phone call. "I do not conduct critical corporate business negotiations over a casual phone call, Garrison," I replied firmly, cutting straight through his fake sweetness. "If the board of directors wishes to discuss a brand new commercial licensing agreement for my proprietary software, I am willing to carve out some time from my vacation for a formal video conference." "Yes, absolutely. A video conference is perfect," he stammered quickly, desperate for any possible lifeline I threw at him. "I can set up a Zoom link right now and send it to your personal email. However," I added, lowering my voice to a cold, unwavering, and authoritative register, "I require the entire board of directors to be present on the call, and the meeting must be officially recorded from the very first second to the last, with an unedited copy of that recording provided directly to my legal counsel for evidentiary purposes. Those are my absolute, non-negotiable terms." There was a long, agonizing silence on the other end of the line as Garrison was forced to swallow his remaining pride. "Understood," he finally whispered in absolute defeat. "I will send you the invite immediately." 30 minutes later, I opened my laptop and clicked the video conference link Garrison had hastily provided. I made sure my camera was angled perfectly to capture the sparkling blue ocean and the white sands of Cabo San Lucas in the background. The stark contrast between my sunny tropical paradise and the grim fluorescent-lit boardroom on their end was absolutely poetic. As the video feeds populated the screen, I saw 12 incredibly tense individuals. The entire board of directors was present, looking as though they were attending a funeral. Sitting at the head of the heavy mahogany table, looking like he had aged 10 years overnight, was Garrison. His custom designer suit was terribly wrinkled, his tie was carelessly loosened, and the smug aura that usually radiated from him had completely evaporated. Before anyone else could speak, Garrison forced a painfully fake smile and cleared his throat. "Paisley," he began, desperately trying to inject some authority back into his trembling voice, "we appreciate you taking the time. Let us bypass the aggressive legal posturing. We acknowledge the minor administrative oversight regarding your limited liability company contract. We are prepared to make you a very generous offer right now to acquire the intellectual property outright. We will give you $100,000 for the permanent transfer of the code, and as a gesture of goodwill, we will bring you back onto the team as a senior operations manager." I was still trying to play the corporate game. He foolishly thought he could buy my life's work for pennies and lure me back with a meaningless middle management title. I let his ridiculous offer hang in the digital air for a few agonizing seconds. Then, I leaned back in my chair and genuinely laughed out loud. It was not a polite chuckle. It was a deep, resonant laugh of pure, unadulterated victory. "Garrison," I said, my smile fading into a look of absolute, icy resolve. "You really do not understand the concept of strategic vision, do you? You fired me yesterday at 10 o'clock in the morning. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, while your expensive consultants were blindly clicking around my user interface, I was sitting in the downtown executive offices of Aero Freight Solutions." The collective gasp in the Austin boardroom was loud enough to echo through my laptop speakers. Aero Freight Solutions was their absolute biggest, most aggressive competitor in the national logistics space. They had been trying to dethrone OmniVantage for over 4 years. I took my proprietary routing algorithm, the very same technology you foolishly discarded, and I signed an exclusive permanent licensing agreement with Aero Freight, I explained, watching the remaining blood completely drain from Garrison's face. They immediately recognized the immense value of the digital asset. As of midnight last night, my software is powering their entire backend network. Not only that, but Aero Freight has placed a team of top-tier corporate attorneys on retainer specifically to handle any frivolous lawsuits you might try to throw my way. Oh, and their sales team has spent the entire morning happily acquiring all the furious hospital networks that you are currently failing to serve. The chairman of the board, an older gentleman with silver hair and a terrifyingly blank expression, leaned closer to the boardroom microphone. Are you telling us, Ms. Hernandez, that our core routing logic now completely belongs to our direct rival? I am telling you that you no longer have a functional business, sir, I replied calmly. However, I do possess a strong sense of ethical responsibility. I know there are critical medical supplies currently stuck in your broken transit hubs, and innocent patients should not suffer just because of your spectacular management failures. So, I am going to offer you a temporary lifeline. I leaned forward, looking directly into the camera lens. Aero Freight has officially authorized me to grant OmniVantage a strict, non-renewable 30-day emergency operating license. This will allow your trucks to finally deliver the stranded medical freight and give your company exactly 1 month to attempt to build a brand new routing system from scratch before you inevitably file for bankruptcy. Garrison looked like he was about to physically be sick, but he managed to croak out a question. How much is the fee? The emergency licensing fee is $50,000, I stated clearly. Garrison exhaled a shaky, heavy breath of relief. Fine, we will authorize the accounting department to pay the $50,000 today. You misunderstood me, Garrison, I interrupted, my voice sharp as glass. It is $50,000 per day, payable in advance, every single morning, for the next 30 days. Totaling $1,500,000. If a single wire transfer is late, the map goes blank again. Garrison completely lost his mind. He slammed both of his fists violently onto the mahogany table, his face turning a furious shade of crimson. You absolute parasite, he screamed, completely abandoning any remaining shred of professionalism. We are not paying you $50,000 a day. I will drag you through federal court. I will personally see to it that you never work in this tech industry again. You are just a glorified keyboard monkey. Silence, the silver-haired chairman commanded. His voice was not loud, but it possessed a heavy, lethal authority that instantly cut through Garrison's hysterical shouting. The chairman slowly turned his head to look at the sweating vice president of operations. Garrison, in your first 3 weeks at this company, your brilliant macro-level strategy has cost us our core technology, handed our biggest competitor the ultimate market advantage, paralyzed the national medical supply chain, and absolutely destroyed our stock price. You are, without a doubt, the most grossly incompetent individual I have ever encountered in my entire professional career. Garrison opened his mouth to stammer out a defense, but the chairman raised a single, silencing finger. You are fired. Effective immediately, for gross negligence and a catastrophic breach of fiduciary duty. Building security is standing right outside the glass door as we speak. They will escort you off the premises immediately. Now get out. Garrison stared at the board members in sheer horror, realizing that his grand corporate empire had just crumbled into dust. A second later, the system administrator running the video call mercifully muted Garrison's microphone and terminated his video feed. His square on the screen went completely black. The chairman turned his attention back to the camera, looking utterly defeated, but entirely resigned to his fate. Ms. Hernandez, we will wire the first $50,000 to your designated holding account within the hour. Please send over the emergency license agreement. It is a pleasure doing business with you, I said softly. I ended the call and gently closed my laptop. I picked up my fresh cup of morning coffee, took a highly satisfying sip, and watched the digital notification pop up on my phone screen as the first massive wire transfer officially cleared my bank account. I was no longer a disposable technician. I was officially stepping into my brand new chapter as the Chief Technology Officer of Aero Freight Solutions. Leaving behind a very expensive permanent masterclass on the true definition of strategic thinking. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to today's story. We are always curious about our community, so please let us know where in the world you are tuning in from right now. As I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, YouTube has completely demonetized our channel, leaving us with absolutely no budget to continue operating here. Because of this harsh reality, we will unfortunately not be uploading any new videos in the near future and are transitioning our operations entirely over to Patreon. If you enjoyed this story and want to support our work, please help us by joining the Boss Revenge Stories Patreon channel. Over there, you can listen to our absolute best, exclusive true stories that we simply cannot make public on YouTube. You can easily join us by scanning the QR code currently displayed on your screen, or by clicking the Patreon link located in the description box or the pinned comment below. Thank you again from the bottom of our hearts, and we truly hope to see you there.